So what I'm teaching today, before I teach, we're going to do this prayer. I actually wrote a prayer. I'm kind of embarrassed about it, but I've been doing this for 35 years, and I thought, well, it's time. Because there are no prayers that sum up what we do. I mean, there's lots of prayers, and if you put them all together, they sum up what we do. But there's not one prayer that sums up what we do, and this is it. So we're going to say this prayer together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan et kol darkav, la'amo Yisrael ketavniot, l'kol hadevarim shabashamayim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, everlasting King, who has given all of his ways to his people Israel as pictures of all things heavenly. That's what we're all about. And I have missed so much everybody, getting together with congregation. And it's so strange that all over the world, especially in Israel, they couldn't meet. And they were like, we don't care, we're going to meet. And they got together, and they got together for 3 services a day in many communities. Nothing happened. Nothing bad happened. So I'm so glad to be back. I just want to make a couple little announcements. The bathrooms are down that long hall on the left, right that way, west. That's west, right? This is east? Yeah, that's west. So down that big hallway to the left are the bathrooms. We have Kiddush over here after services. And if you all want to do anything for services, if you want to sing, if you want to do anything, just let me know, and we'll make it happen. We got facilities now where we can actually accommodate just about anything. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to try my best to teach without being able to see the slides, so I'm going to have to keep turning around. So what we're going to do is first count the Omer. In case you haven't been counting the Omer, today is the 40th day. Let's stand. You stand to count the Omer. And I've got the words up there. I hope you can see them. I know it's awfully small because that screen is so far up there. All right. Ready? Let's go. Today is 40 days of the Omer, which is 5 weeks and 5 days. Master of the world, you have set up for us through Moses, your servant, to count Sfirat HaOmer in order to purify us from our evil and uncleanness. As you have written in your Torah, you shall count for yourselves. You shall count 50 days, so that the souls of your people Israel may be cleansed from their defilement. Therefore, may it be your will, Lord our God, and God of our fathers, that in the merit of the Sfirat HaOmer that I counted today, the blemish that I have caused in the Sephirah of this day may be rectified. You may be seated. And that's what Sfirat HaOmer is all about. It's all about rectification, tikkun, which is restoration, cleansing. Because Yeshua cleansed, Yeshua didn't cleanse, Yeshua took away the sin nature to make our spirits alive. We were born with the dead spirit, but that doesn't do anything, not a single thing for our souls. Nothing. So the rest of life is about cleansing our souls from defilement that we gather through the year, and fixing, repairing our souls. And this takes a whole lifetime to do. Sfirat HaOmer is set apart especially for that. And God is really nice. You only have to pick 1 or 2 of the things, the attributes to try to work on. So that's what we're doing. But we're taking a break from talking about that, and we're going to talk about the kingdom. Haven't been talking about the kingdom much because I've been talking about cleansing our soul. So now we're going to return back to the very basic thing, which is the kingdom. And we're going to go to the Torah portion, which is about the kingdom, only in code form. So let's go to Leviticus chapter 25. All right, There's a lot of words up there. It looks like a lot, but it's not as much as you think. We're going to break it down. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to break it down verse by verse by verse, and we're just going to look at each verse and how it's a picture. So it's not as big as it looks. Let's see, I'm going to start in verse 2. No, I'm going to start at verse 1, because this is the name of the Torah portion. Then the Lord spoke to Moshe in Mount Sinai, not at, not on, it's B'har. Now, that's the name of the Torah portion today, is B'har, which means on or in the mountain, inside the mountain. So all the pictures that God gave to Moses were in the mountain, kind of like a hologram or a holograph, where it's three-dimensional, but you can see all the way around it. It's three-dimensional, you can see it, but you could walk right through it. It's like an image that's three-dimensional. And so that's in the mountain. This is very important because most people think that God commanded Moses. He did not command him. He showed him in the mountain. So that's how the Torah portion starts. And then in verse 2, when you come into the land which I shall give you, then the land shall have a Shabbat to the Lord. The land shall have a Shabbat. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in its crop. But during the 7th year, the land shall have a Shabbat rest, a Shabbat to the Lord. You shall not sow your field, you shall not prune your vineyard. Your harvest after growth you shall not reap. Your grapes of untrimmed vines you shall not gather. The land shall have a Shabbat. You don't do anything. You don't sow, you don't reap, you don't gather. You don't do anything for a whole year. This is the 7th year after 6 years. Nothing. Now, I was thinking about this weeks ago, and then this week also. On Shabbat, think about this. On Shabbat, you're not supposed to light a fire. That means no cooking, right? That means no light in your house. That means you can't read if it's dark. That means you can't cook anything. You can't do anything. You can't do anything at all. But we do everything. But if you think about it, Shabbat is really, you're not supposed to do anything. So how do you survive? It's boring. It's stupid. It's a stupid thing to do. What do you do today? Nothing. Well, what do you do? Nothing. It's just crazy if you think about it. Well, this is a whole year of that, of nothing. You don't gather anything. You don't, I guess you got to cook to survive, but you don't do anything. Now, usually, we don't do Shabbat. We don't keep Shabbat. We keep a little teeny, tiny part of Shabbat, which is fine. We do what we can. But really, Shabbat, you don't do anything. You don't light a fire. You don't turn a light on. You don't turn the TV on. You don't turn the lights on so you can read the Bible. You don't do anything. So, nothing. It doesn't mean you just lay in bed. You devote it to God. You pray. But if you have no light, you can't see the prayer book. So you light lamps beforehand. You turn on lights beforehand. Now, I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying this is how it was. So I want you to think about this on a global scale. Well, at least Israel scale. Think about this on an Israel scale. Doing nothing. So who's going to gather in the crops? Who's going to... Who's going to dig and plant and hoe and sow the seed and gather the crop? Who's going to do all that? So that's what we're going to talk about. All right, let's go deeper into this. Let's go to verse 6. All of you shall have the Shabbat of the land for food. That's what it says. It doesn't say the Shabbat products or the Shabbat produce. It just says, you shall eat the Shabbat. That's your food. That's what it says. You shall have the Shabbat of the land for food. Yourself,
your male and your female slaves, your hired man, your foreign resident, those who live as aliens with you, even your cattle and the animals that are in your land shall all have its crops to eat. What's crops? Shabbat crops. But you're not allowed to touch them. You're going to eat that, but you're not allowed to gather it. You're going to eat that, but you're not allowed to sow or reap or anything like that. But you're going to eat it. All right, so this is setting up for us. This is setting up for us a picture on a much, much, much bigger scale. All right, let's go on. Verse 8. Then you shall count off 7 Shabbats of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, so that you have the time of the 7 Shabbat of years, namely 49 years. It sounds very repetitious. So why all the repetition? I'm going to show you. You shall then sound a ram's horn, which, by the way, is not what it says. It doesn't say that. I'm going to talk about that too. You shall then sound what it says in Hebrew is a yovel, a jubilee, a yovel. Abroad, on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement, you shall sound a yovel through your land. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year and proclaim a release through the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a yovel for you. That's Jubilee. And each of you shall return to his own property, and each of you return to his own family. You shall have the 50th year as a yovel. You shall not sow, you shall not reap its aftergrowth, nor gather in from its untrimmed vines. It doesn't say untrimmed vines, by the way. It says what you've set aside. All the food you've set aside. So then how do you eat it? You're not allowed to gather it, but you're going to eat it. You're not allowed to sow it, but you're going to eat it. You're not allowed to hoe it and weed it and do all, but you're going to eat of it. It's crazy. But it's setting up a picture for us to show us, I'm going to give you that, but you're not going to do it. Somebody else is going to do it for you. Okay, next slide.
So we're going to start. Next slide, please. So I don't know if you can read this, but these are the words of Rashi, his commentary on the very first thing that we read. It says, the Lord spoke to Moshe in Mount Sinai. Now he says on Mount Sinai, which would be al hahar, not ba-hahar, not bahar. So it's in the mountain. But he says, what special relevance does the subject of the Shemitah, that is the release of the fields of the 7th year, have with Mount Sinai? So what he's doing is he's saying, what is the link? And this is important. What's the link between Mount Sinai and the Shemitah year? How do we put those together? Or are we supposed to put those together? And he's saying, oh yeah, baby, we put those together. He says, this teaches us that for Shemitah, its general principles and its finer details were all stated from Sinai. Now, what he says is that all the laws, almost all the laws, were restated in the plains of Moab at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. In fact, the whole book of Deuteronomy is in the plains of Moab right before they go into the land. Okay? But he says, this isn't. The Shemitah year and the Jubilee year are never restated in Deuteronomy. Why? Why? So what he's saying is this. He's saying they're going to go into the land, and so Moshe says, you're going to do this and do this and do this. Don't forget, you got to do this and you got to do this and you got to do this. But he doesn't do that with the Jubilee and the Shemitah year. Why? Because all of it, all of the stuff about the Shemitah year and the Jubilee year were given on Mount Sinai. That means every single tiny, quote, law about the Shemitah and the Jubilee was given at Sinai, not later, like other laws. So what he's saying is this, it's not for the land. They're going into Israel, so this stuff about the Shemitah and the Jubilee, it doesn't even apply to the land. And it says it's all about the land. So what is it? It's something else. That's what he's saying. That's what Rashi is saying. It's about something else. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right.
So we have a pattern. You all know this pattern, I hope, that you have the 7-day. You have 7 times 7 days. When do you have 7 times 7 days? When is 7 times 7 days? 49 days. Right now, during the Omer. 7 times 7 days during the Omer. Then you have the 7th month. What's the 7th month? Tishri. Tishri, 7th month. Then you have the 7th year. That's the Shemitah that we're talking about. Then you have 7 times 7 years, which leads to the Jubilee, which is the last one, and all of them, every single one of those. And there's one other. Can anybody think of what I'm leaving out of 7 times 7 or something like that? Anybody know what I'm leaving out? No? 7 times 70. Because they were kicked out of, Israel was kicked out of, well, the Jews were kicked out of Israel to Babylon for 70 years so that the land could catch up on the 490 years that they didn't keep the Shemitah year, which is 70 years times 7, 490 years. All of those are the same thing, every one of them. They're all a picture of the kingdom. Why? Because the kingdom's 7th day. So you have 6 days, and then the kingdom, the Shabbat. Now, most believers don't know this. Every believer is supposed to know this. It is kindergarten for believers. It's supposed to be kindergarten. You guys know this, hopefully. But that 7th day, that kingdom, what the church calls the millennium, is called in the scriptures Hayom, the day. That's all. It's just called the day. It's called the 7th day. It's called the Shabbat, and it's called Menucha, rest. All of the Jubilee, the Shemitah year, the Shabbat itself that God gave us every week, the counting of the Omer, 7 times 7, they're all a picture of the same thing, the kingdom. So that's what we're going to look at. And by the way, this is what the rabbis say. They say that all the 7s, it's not the number of completion. If you've heard that, it is wrong. That's wrong. It's the number of the Shabbat. It's the number of the kingdom. So, all of these being the same picture, let's talk about the picture we're in right now. 7 weeks of counting the Omer, right? What's at the end of count? Well, let me back up. When the Jews had left Egypt and they were going for 49 days, where were they going? Where were they headed? No. They were going to Mount Sinai. Weren't they? They were going to Mount Sinai. And as they were going to Mount Sinai, they counted 50 days to Mount Sinai. And then on Shavuot, at Mount Sinai, God showed up, and that was the revelation of God. So they're on this journey to Mount Sinai. Yeah? Just like we are right now. We're in day 40 of the 50 days. 10 days from now is Shavuot. That's the revelation of God. So the same thing is true for all the 7s, especially if you have 7 times 7. So therefore, we have Mount Sinai being a picture of the kingdom. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because they were on a journey to Mount Sinai for 49 days, and they got there to that mountain, Mount Sinai, and the world is on a journey for 6,000 years to the 7th day. So that's the kingdom. They are the same, and that's what we're going to see. We're going to see that the counting of the Omer at Mount Sinai is a picture of the kingdom. This is the picture that God set up. Nobody knows this. I didn't know this. Nobody knows this, and it's all over Judaism. They say it a lot. All right, next slide. All right, so let's look at the first part. I was talking about you don't sow, you don't prune, you don't reap, you don't do anything for the whole year during the Shemitah year. This is what it says in Hebrew.
It says, the land shall not be sown or pruned. It says that in English, but that's not necessarily what it says in Hebrew. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap your aftergrowth. What's aftergrowth? That's the first question. What's aftergrowth? What is that? Well, if you don't know what that is, you don't know what it's saying. You shall not gather your grapes you had set aside. That's what it says in Hebrew, that you had set aside. That means like you gathered them, like your vintage, to make wine, make grape juice. The land shall have a Shabbat year. So again, you don't gather that. You leave it for everybody, including you. Now, here's the key verse to make all of this make sense. It's in Deuteronomy, in the laws of warfare. Deuteronomy 20. It says, Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh. It means, for man is a tree of the field. That's literally what it says. For man is a tree of the field. Really? Man is a tree of the field. So trees are a picture of men. Because ki hadam etz hasadeh. Man is a tree of the field. When you besiege a city, don't destroy its trees by swinging an axe against them. It means the fruit trees. It doesn't mean any kind of tree. Only the fruit trees. Why? Don't cut them down. Why? Because man is a tree of the field, that it should be besieged by you. You're not making war on the tree, you're making war on the people in the city. So don't cut the fruit trees down, because you can eat of them. You know all those verses that believers love to quote about fruit? By their fruit you shall know them. I'm going to check his fruit. Well, that whole concept of people bearing fruit, it's a metaphor that starts here. Ki hadam etz hasadeh. For man is a tree of the field. So everybody is a different kind of tree. You can try to figure out what kind of tree you are if you want. It's easy. You're all a vine. You can also be a different kind of tree, but you're all part of the vine. So in the kingdom, now think about this. It's not pruned. It's not pruned, but you shall eat of it. Do you guys know anything about pruning? Pruning, you trim, let me say it this way. The sugars burst up into the vine, right? They get trapped at the end of a branch. They got nowhere to go. So if you prune it, you snip that, they blast out into other small branches. And they grow really, really fast. Not just vines, but other trees too. But I'm talking about vine right now. So that's what makes the vine grow. Every year, I don't know if you've seen vines at the beginning of the season, there's nothing. They prune them back to nothing, just a stump. And then they turn into this long spreading thing. This all happens in a couple months. But they have to be trimmed or pruned. You don't do that in the kingdom. So what is that a picture of? And you don't gather the aftergrowth, whatever that is. What's that a picture of? Next slide. So, it says in Hebrew, lo tizmar. Now the word zamar is pruning. It's the same word for musical worship. Zamar is one of the 7 Hebrew words for praise. Zamar means to prune, to clip, to cut. Why Zamar for music? Because music is made out of notes, clipped sections. I can't remember the bars, measures. They're called measures. Is that right in music? You have so many measures. Well, why are they called measures? Because they're chopped. That's what music is. They're chopped into numbers. So Zamar is the same word. This refers, Rashi says, Zamar, lo tizmar. This refers to the vine branches that are cut and then burned. So what, say you got a big vine, tons of fruit on it, and you go and you prune it, what are you going to do with the branches? Can you make something out of it? You can't even make anything out of it. You can't even make a table leg out of them. They're too thin. They got no structure.
So pruned vines that are pruned are good for nothing but to be thrown in the fire. That's what they're for. They're for firewood. And that's all they're for. So Isaiah 33 says, now I will be exalted, now I will be lifted up. You have conceived chaff, you have given birth to stubble. So obviously these are bad guys, right? My breath will consume them like a fire, consume you like a fire. The peoples will be burned to lime like cut thorns, which are burned in the fire. These are people are vines. Vines are people. But this is really, really important. The vine is only Israel. The vine is only Israel. It says in Isaiah 5, to Israel, let me sing now for my well-beloved. My beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hill, and he digged and he planted and he put a big wall around it, and he looked for it to produce good vines, but it produced garbage. And so what did I do? I knocked down the wall and destroyed the vine. And he says, you, Israel, are my vine. In John chapter 5, Yeshua says, I am the vine. So what is he saying? Israel is exactly the same as Yeshua. Yeshua is exactly the same as Israel. They are the same. They look the same. They taste the same. They say the same thing. They are the same. Israel and Yeshua are the same thing. And so he says to Israel, in the day of the Lord, I'm going to come and I'm going to burn you up like, pruned off stuff. So here's the picture. The picture is this. In the kingdom, well, let me back up. In the Shemitah year and in the Jubilee year, there's no pruning, right? No pruning. Well, that's the birth pangs. The Jubilee and the Shemitah year is a picture of the kingdom, but the good part of the kingdom. We've seen a million pictures of the birth pangs. This is the only one that's a picture of the good part. This is the good part of the kingdom, the actual kingdom of the kingdom. So that's what it is in John 15. I think I said John 5. It's John 15. John 15, it says, I am the true vine. My Father is the vine dresser. And at the end of it, he says, and if that person stays in me and I in him, he'll bear much fruit. If anyone does not remain in me, that doesn't mean being in Christ. If Israel and Yeshua are exactly the same, the only way to stay plugged into Yeshua is to be in, among, with, partaking of Israel. The prayers of Judaism, the festivals, the fast, the cycle of the year of Judaism. That's what it's there for. That's how you stay plugged into Yeshua. So he says, if you stay plugged into him, he'll bear much fruit. But if anyone doesn't stay plugged into that, he's thrown away like a branch and dries up, and they gather them and throw them in the fire. So this is quoting directly from Isaiah 33 and Isaiah 5 about Israel being the vine. And by the way, there's many, many others that say the same thing. So this is what he's talking about. Next slide. But God says no pruning in the kingdom. So the verse 6, you shall have the Shabbat of the land as food. I don't know if you ever thought about that. So you don't eat the food, you eat the Shabbat. That's your food. What is the Shabbat a picture of? What's the Shabbat a picture of?
Kingdom.
The kingdom. That's your food. That's your food. That's our food now. I mean, like right now, that's supposed to be our food. But if you don't know what the kingdom is, and you don't know what it's going to be like, and you don't know what you're going to be doing, and you don't know what your job is, and you don't know where you're going to live, and you don't know what your body's going to be like, your resurrected body, and you don't know who you're going to be with, and you don't know what your authority is going to be there to do stuff, how are you going to eat of that? So you have to know these things. We got to know these things. We have to know what we're going to be doing in the kingdom. It's not a crapshoot. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to be praising God like this for 1,000 years. Yeah, really? You need to know what you're going to be doing. And that's our food. That's what we eat. Now, Rashi says about this, I keep having these words from Rashi. Rashi says, I did not prohibit you to eat it. It's talking about, the vines and the fruit and the grain and all that. I didn't prohibit you to eat it or to derive benefit from it. You get to eat. Only that you should not treat it as if you were its owner. So now we own stuff. In the kingdom, you're going to see very clearly, we're not going to own things. We're not going to own things. Other people are going to do the work for us. Rather, everyone is deemed equal regarding the Shemitah produce. You, your slaves, your hired worker, and your resident. Now, does that sound familiar to you about anything in the book of Acts? Does that sound recognizable to you from the book of Acts? Remember it said that when the Jews in Jerusalem became born again, remember it said they had nothing that anyone said was theirs, but they owned everything in common. Right. Is biblical communism. And they owned everything in common. They were living the kingdom. It did not last very long. You know why? It tells us a little bit later in the book of Acts exactly why. Because Hellenizers started, it's what it says. It says the Hellenistic, is what it says in Greek. The Hellenistic ones began to cause trouble. And so they had to set apart, I think it was 7 elders, to stop the arguments that the Hellenizers were starting because they weren't feeding the poor. And so everything fell apart. But when it first started out, they were doing this. They were living the kingdom. Like nobody owned anything. Everybody, you need that? Here, take it. And everybody were together in unity, living the kingdom. Didn't last very long. All right, so we got some verses here that talk about the fruit in the day of the Lord, in the day of the Lord, in the kingdom. Revelation 7:9. I just threw this in there just to show, that it's made up of everybody. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could count, from every nation and tribe, and people, and language. So that's Jews and Gentiles in the kingdom. Jews and Gentiles in the kingdom. Standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. If there's palm branches in their hands, what's the date? You should immediately know. Okay, what's the festival? No, not Passover. No, not Shavuot. Sukkot. It's Sukkot. In the temple, all seven days of Sukkot, they had lulavim, and they would worship. But they also had 20-foot tall palm branches that they would worship with in the temple, and then they'd lay them up against the side of the altar. So, palm branches in Sukkot. So all the nations, all the Gentiles are together at Sukkot in the kingdom. So now, here's some verses about fruit in the kingdom. Isaiah 4:2. This is about the kingdom. We know that because it says, in that day. In what day? In the day of the Lord. So anytime you come to in that day in the Bible, it is always talking about the day of the Lord. Bayom Hahu. That day which belongs to God. Isaiah 4:1. There is no chapter 4 in this Bible. What in the world? Oh, there it is. Okay. Porque 7 mujeres echarán mano de un hombre. For 7 women will take hold of one man in that day, so we're in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes, only let us be called by your name, take away our reproach. In that day, there it is again. In that day, the branch of the Lord. Now, branch is a title of the Messiah. All the rabbis, well, not all, many of the rabbis say that Tzemach, branch, is a title of the Messiah. The branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious. So if the branch is the Messiah, that's why the Messiah can say, I am the vine, you are the branches. I'm the vine. Well, I'm also the branch, so you're one of my branches. That's how that works. The branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth will be the pride and adornment of the survivors of Israel. The survivors of Israel. What did they survive in that day? They survived what the church calls the tribulation, which the Bible calls the birth pangs. So this is after the birth pangs. They've survived, and what have they got? Fruit. I want you to picture the Holocaust. The Jews after the Holocaust. Did they have anything? They didn't even have skin on their bones. Right. They had nothing. And it's going to be worse in the day of the Lord, in the birth pangs. But they're going to have fruit. And it's going to fill the whole earth. That makes no sense whatsoever. How can the survivors of the birth pangs have fruit that's going to fill the whole earth? Now, many Christians and Messianic Jews have read these verses and go, oh, look at Israel now. They make the biggest oranges, and they fill the whole earth with their fruit. They got the biggest avocados. And they say this, and they're serious about it. You know, that's fine. They got good avocados and good oranges. But that's not what it's talking about. It says in that day. So I'm telling you that the fruit of the believers and of the survivors is what all this talk about the Jubilee and the Shemitah is about. Somebody's got to collect it. You're not allowed to sow. You're not allowed to prune. You're not allowed to gather anything that you planted. You leave it for the poor. So how do you end up with that fruit that fills the whole earth? That's what I'm going to show you. Okay, Isaiah 27. Isaiah 27. In that day, that's how it starts. In that day. So we're talking about the day of the Lord. And then in verse 2, in that day, a vineyard of wine, sing of it. Who's the vineyard of wine? Who's the vineyard of wine?
Israel.
Israel. I, the Lord, am its keeper. I water it every moment so that no one will damage it. I guard it night and day. I have no wrath. Should someone give me briars and thorns in battle, I would step on them. I'll burn them up completely. So he's just saying, I protect Israel. In the day of the Lord, I protect Israel perfectly. We know this is in the day of the Lord because it says in that day. And then in verse 6 it says, in the days to come. In the days to come. Jacob will take root. Israel will blossom and sprout. We read this now, and we take it for granted like, yeah, that makes sense. No, it does not make sense. You don't plant a human and get fruit. But that's what it says. And so we now read it, we're like, oh, it's a beautiful metaphor. Is it really? I mean, you can't just take this stuff and go, yeah, that makes sense. No, it does not. Only if Israel is a plant does it make sense. Only if Israel is the vine does it make sense. But if you don't have that metaphor, that picture, this doesn't make sense. It sounds like gobbledygook. So, in days to come, Jacob will take root, and Israel will blossom and sprout, and they'll fill the whole world with fruit. I'm saying this is Judaism. I mean, if the way of Jacob, of Israel, is the Jewish world, the Torah, the cycle of the Jewish year, if that's the way of Israel, and that takes root in the earth and fills the whole world, what does that mean? That means Judaism is going to fill the world, doesn't it? I mean, I don't see how else you can get anything else from that. Judaism is going to fill the whole earth. And everybody from every tribe and nation and tongue and people is going to do it. It ain't like that now, but it's going to be like that in the kingdom. Isaiah 37. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's a story. This is about King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah is attacked. He's the king of Judah. He's attacked by Sennacherib. I don't know how you say that in Spanish. Sennacherib. And he attacks Jerusalem. And Hezekiah goes into birth pangs. He says, I'm in birth pangs. So it's a picture, it's a picture of the birth pangs in the day of the Lord. And Jerusalem is attacked. And he goes to Isaiah and he says, oh, pray for us. What are we going to do? And Isaiah's answer is about the day of the Lord. It's also about the situation at hand. But more than that, it's an answer about the day of the Lord. And he talks, and we're told that it's a Jubilee year that this happens. Let's go down to verse 30. This will be the sign for you. He's talking to Hezekiah. This will be the sign for you. You will eat this year what grows of itself, and in the second year what springs from the same. And in the third year sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. What is he talking about there? That's exactly what it says in the rest of the Torah portion today about the Jubilee year. It says the same exact thing. It says, you don't gather, you don't sow, you don't reap. I'm going to make you so abundant in fruit that you're going to be able to eat this year that you don't work, and next year that you don't work. When you go out and all you do is plant. And then the third year, you're going to be taken care of when that stuff that you planted finally comes up. So really, it's not 1 year you got to worry about. It's 3 years you got to worry about if you don't plant. Does that make sense? So we know this is a Jubilee year because he quotes the Torah about the Jubilee. So this is a Jubilee year. He's in birth pangs. He's being attacked by Assyria. And he says, don't worry, it's a Jubilee. I'm going to take care of you. And he says, verse... I keep going to the Spanish. I can't find it. He says, survivors will take root downward and bear fruit upward. And because I don't have my Bible, it's hard. Verse what? 31? Oh, is that what? Okay, I guess that's it. Oh, yeah, there it is. The surviving remnant of the house of Judah will again take root downward. Okay, there it is again. Humans don't take root. Humans don't bear fruit. Humans don't take root, and humans don't bear fruit. So what is he saying? What is he saying? Israel is the vine. You don't prune the vine when? In the Jubilee or the Shemitah. You don't prune the vine in the kingdom. Pruning is the main disciplinary act of the plant. When you snip that off, it's discipline. That's what it's called in agriculture. It's called the main disciplinary act of the plant. So after the birth pangs, now think about this. After the birth pangs, God says, I will never spank you again. Never. Now, maybe that's no big deal to you, but to a Jew, that's a big deal. I will never spank you again. Ever. I'm just going to take care of you. Not only am I going to take care of you, but I'm going to have everybody take care of you. And again, that might not be a big deal to you, but it is to a Jew. Because in the kingdom, we're going to be taken care of. And I'm going to show you how specific this is.
It's not like this now, but it's going to be like this then.
Isaiah 65 starts out by saying, I will bring a new heaven and a new earth. So we know that this is in the kingdom. Everything's new. And by the way, this is not talking about the New Jerusalem. This is talking about the kingdom. So, let's see. Let's go to verse 17. Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem for rejoicing and her people for gladness. That sounds like the New Jerusalem to me. And it is, only it's not. Because the kingdom is a smaller version of the New Jerusalem. That's all it is. The kingdom, 1,000 years of God ruling from Jerusalem, just gets bigger. And it becomes a 1,500-mile cube, right? A 1,500-mile dice, a cube. So it's talking about the New Jerusalem, but it's not talking about the New Jerusalem. It's talking about the kingdom. And he says, verse 19, I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people, that there will no longer be heard in her the voice of weeping, the sound of crying. No longer will there be in it an infant who lives just a few days. Now, this is how I know it's the kingdom. No longer will there be a baby who just lives a few days, or an old man who doesn't live out his days. For the youth, the young man, will die in the New Jerusalem. So it's not the New Jerusalem, it's the kingdom. People are going to die in the kingdom. But this says the youth will die at the age of 100. So, an old man would be 1,000. Just multiply by 10. And the one who does not reach the age of 100 will be thought accursed. They will build houses. This is not the New Jerusalem. This is the kingdom. They will build houses and live in them. They will plant vineyards. Yes, there's going to be vineyards planted in the kingdom. And eat their fruit. And they will not build and then somebody else live in their house. They'll plant and then nobody else will eat it up. For as the lifetime of a tree, ki hadam etz hasadeh, for man is a tree of the field, right? So, as the lifetime of a tree, so will be the days of my people. How long are people going to live? 1,000 years. But if you have a resurrected body already, you're still going to be in the kingdom. You won't die, but there's going to be people dying in the kingdom. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. 1,000 years is a long time. But the normal age of a person will be 1,000, even an unresurrected body. So this is talking about the kingdom. I like that. My chosen ones will wear out the work of their hands. In other words, you build something, you'll live longer than that thing you built. I like that. All right, Ezekiel 36. This is really hard to keep turning and looking and having a Bible. This is really tough. Haven't done this in a year and a half. 36. 22. 36:22. Thus says the Lord God, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I'm about to act, but for my holy name, which you have profaned among the Gentiles where you went. I will vindicate the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, which you have profaned in their midst. Then the Gentiles will know that I am the Lord, when I prove myself holy among you in their sight. For I will take you from the Gentiles, gather you from the lands, and bring you into your own land. What is that land? What is that land? Yes, it's the kingdom. It is not Israel. We know this because of Hebrews chapter 3 and chapter 4, that says that Joshua was not leading them into a land, but into a day. And that day is the seventh day, and that day is the day of rest. And then he says it's the Shabbat. Then he says, just like, when God created everything for 6 days and then rested on the seventh, you will rest on the seventh day, which is the kingdom. So it's not Israel. It's the kingdom that he's talking about here. And he says, I'm going to gather you from all the Gentiles and take you to the kingdom. All right, I guess that's enough for that. No, verse 30. I will multiply the fruit of the tree and the produce of the field, so that you will not receive again the disgrace of famine among the Gentiles. Now, it just sounds normal, but it's not. Remember, in a Jubilee year, in a Shemitah year, which is the kingdom, you believers, you Israel, you Jews, are not going to prune, you're not going to sow, you're not going to reap, you're not going to gather, you're not going to do any agricultural work, but you get to eat of that. So who's going to do the work? You can't just lay in your bed for 1,000 years. You got to do something. All right, next slide. All right, Isaiah 11. So to show you how different and how weird things are going to be, they're going to be like the Jubilee. Now think about this. In the Jubilee and the Shemitah year, you let everything go fallow, right? What if you're hungry? What if you're hungry? What do? Say you want some wine. You want to make some wine. Well, you got grapes that you've set aside, but they're ownerless. You can't say you own them. You have to invite everybody to eat of it too. And all your agricultural stuff, you have to leave after you harvest. You have to leave what's left for the poor, right? So what do you eat? Do you just have storehouses full of stuff and you got to eat that? Well, yeah, partially. But it's more complicated than that. What about your animals? What do the animals eat? So that's why we're going to look at this verse that he says in Leviticus. Even your cattle, that's a chaya, means a living thing. Even your chaya, your living animals, and the beasts, behema, that means wild beasts, wolves, bears, leopards, lions, tigers, oh my. All the wild beasts, rabbits, that are in your land shall have all the produce to eat. So in other words, the animal is like the person. In the Jubilee and in the Shemitah, the human is just like the animal. What about the beast? The beast of Revelation. So this is after the birth pangs. In the good part of the kingdom, animals are just like people. Now, because of this, some of the rabbis, not many, but a few of them say there's not going to be any kosher laws in the kingdom. Yeah. That's what they say. Why are you saying that? Because the animals are going to be all the same. They're going to be kosher, like a pig and a rabbit. Ugh, rabbits are horrible. Rabbits, evil things. Rabbit is enemy in Hebrew. Arnevet, it means an enemy. Rabbits and pigs and camels, they're going to be just like a lamb or a goat or a cow. And so some of the rabbis said, well, there's no kosher laws in the kingdom. And all the other rabbis go, no, that can't be, because all of these apply in the kingdom. And then the one who said that goes, oh yeah, that's true. Both things are true. You can't just say both things are true. Well, I'm going to say both things are true until somebody comes and tells us the answer. And then another rabbi goes, well, what are we supposed to do? Wait around for Elijah? Oh, that's right, that we can do that. And he says, well, just wait for Elijah to give us the answer on the kosher laws. All right, so this says in Isaiah 11, very strange, it says, the shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, there's the Messiah again, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. All right, verse 5. No, verse 6. And the wolf will dwell with the lamb. Really? Really? The wolf will live with the lamb without eating it? Uh-huh. And the leopard will lie down with the young goat. Yeah, really. The leopard's going to lie down with a young goat. This is ridiculous. And the calf and the young lion and the fatling, a fatling is a little cow, together. That's absurd. And a little boy will lead them. The little boy will lead a lion along with a calf. Yeah, okay. And the cow and the bear will graze. A bear is going to graze? That means out in the field. It's out there munching on the stuff in the field with the cows, eating grass. Bears don't eat grass. And their young, the baby bear and the baby cow, will lie down together. And the lion will eat straw like the ox. Lions don't eat straw. They eat ox. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child will put his hand on the viper's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain. What's the holy mountain? The kingdom. The holy mountain is the kingdom. Many, many, many verses say this, especially in Daniel. A rock came down from heaven and smashed the idol that was gold and silver and bronze and iron and its toes of iron and clay, smashed it into a billion pieces, and then that rock grew into a mountain, and it was the kingdom, Hamalchut. It says it. So, the mountain of the Lord is the kingdom. All this stuff is going to happen in the kingdom. So look at what it says. The wolf is going to be with the lamb. Well, in the Bible, what's the wolf a picture of? Do you know? No? Okay. Then it says a leopard will lie down with a young goat, a gedi, like chad gadya, a little goat. A leopard. Who's the leopard in the Bible? Greece. Very good. So the Greeks, Hellenism, will lie down with the Jews. You could look at it in picture form if you want, that's fine. But it's also real. Leopards are going to lie down. They're going to be like kosher animals. They're going to lie down with a young goat. Okay, the lion. Who's the lion in the Bible? No. You're thinking lion of Judah. Who's the lion? Right, Babylon. Babylon will lie down with the calf, with the steer. So you can look at it in Bible, in picture form if you want. The Babylon will be together with the Jews. That's fine. But it's more than that. It's the actual animals will change in the kingdom, so that animals and people are the same, clean. And the bear will lie down with the cow. Who's the bear in the Bible? You know? No, not Russia. Syria? No. Really? Who's the bear? No. Somebody came up with that back in the 1800s and it stuck. Medo-Persia, very good, my best student. Medo-Persia, the Persians. So you could look at it in picture form that kingdom of Medo-Persia will lie down with the Jews. That's fine, but it's more than that. It's the animals themselves will change. Their natures will change in the kingdom, so that the Jubilee will cover the whole earth. It's not just in Israel. This is the whole world. You go to find a leopard or a bear in Moscow, in Russia, and it's going to be the same as in Israel. The whole world is going to be, you're going to love this, the whole world is going to be Judaized. Yay. The whole world is going to be Judaized. And the animals themselves will change nature, so that the Jubilee will be on the whole earth. Because the animals are the same as the humans. Next slide. Next slide. All right. Verse 8 in Leviticus says, you are to also count off 7 Shabbatot of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. This is just like Sfirat HaOmer right now. What day of Sfirat HaOmer are we in? 41. 40. We just counted it. 41. We're in 40. So Don't be contentious, my little friend. So whatever day we're in, so day 40 or whatever, we're counting 7 times 7 days, right? And that leads up to where? Where does that lead up to? Shavuot at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, Shavuot. And it says in Hebrew, Uspartem lachem. You shall count to you, to yourselves, the counting of the Omer, the 49 days, 50 days. And it says in Hebrew, Uspartem lachem. Lachem is corporate. Corporate. It's everybody together. Uspartem lachem. But about the Jubilee, it says Uspartem. Oh, I wrote the wrong thing. Uspartem lach. I wrote the wrong thing in the transliteration. Uspartem lacha. Sorry. Uspartem lacha. Same thing. You shall count to you, only it's personal. Let me say this again. Counting of the Omer is done corporately, as a body. Everybody. But the Jubilee is to us personally. The kingdom is to us personally. If you don't know, I'm just going to try to make it as practical as I can because people get lost really easy with pictures. If you don't know where you're going to live in the kingdom, if you don't know what your job is going to be, and yes, I do know what my job is going to be, and yes, I do know where I'm going to live, and yes, I do know who I'm going to have authority over, and yes, I do know who's going to be an authority over me. I know a lot, not all, but I know a lot of the details of what it's going to be like for me in the kingdom. If you don't know the kingdom like personally. You don't have a close relationship with this thing that God spent the whole Bible talking about. And yet so few people even know. So I would encourage you to start researching the different roles and jobs and places and stuff in the Bible. We're going to look at a couple of them in the Bible to figure out where you're going to be. What are you going to be doing? You're just going to sit around and worship God for you got to be doing something. You're not going to be with your family you're with now, are you? In a resurrected body? So you got to figure it out because it's to us personally. This is personal. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. This is to us personally. Thank you. All right, so next verse, verse 9. You shall then pass a ram's horn on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, you shall sound a shofar throughout all your land. Sorry, I'm boring you. I'll try to perk it up a little bit. So this is strange. Just tell me, when does the resurrection happen? What festival? Huh? Say it loud. Say it loud. I know you know. Rosh Hashanah, of course. We all know resurrection takes place at Rosh Hashanah, right? But when is that teruah, awakening blast, teruah, when is that teruah blown for the Jubilee, which is the kingdom? Just read it. No. 10th day of the 7th month on the Day of Atonement. Did you follow that? Yom Kippur. Let me say it again. When does the resurrection happen?
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. But the Jubilee Teruah, which is the awakening blast for the resurrection, does not happen at Rosh Hashanah. When does it happen?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Isn't that weird? I would think, God, if you've got any kind of sense at all, you'd make all the pictures the same, wouldn't you? And make the Jubilee show up on Rosh Hashanah because it's a picture of the kingdom, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I'm, in my tiny little pea brain, I think, well, there's got to be a verse somewhere that says that Yom Kippur is Rosh Hashanah, right?
Yeah.
And there is. It's the only verse in the whole Bible that says Rosh Hashanah.
In Ezekiel chapter 40, in the 25th year of our exile, at
Rosh Hashanah on the 10th day of the 7th month, which is Yom Kippur. That's what it says. Rosh Hashanah is Yom Kippur. Did you follow that?
Yeah.
You look lost. Are you lost? Yeah. Are you lost? I know, but did you follow the train of thought? Okay, good. Well, that's why I ask. I need to know so I can help. So, did you follow that? Did you all follow that? Yom Kippur is the same as Rosh Hashanah, but only for what? The Jubilee. Only for the Jubilee. Because the Jubilee is a picture of the kingdom. So that when that teruah, remember the teruah from Rosh Hashanah, the awakening blast?
Yeah.
The teruah is blown for the Jubilee at Yom Kippur, not at Rosh Hashanah, making Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur the same exact picture. So therefore, follow what I'm saying. Therefore, the Jubilee, to make it personal, it's about our resurrection. It's about our resurrection. Because the awakening blast is blown on Yom Kippur for that Jubilee to show up. And he even says more about it. It says, Va'ahavarta, and you shall pass something from one place to another, like it says in Exodus chapter 33. Pass through the camp, the sound of the shofar. Pass it through the camp. In other words, it's going from one place to another. Well, at the teruah, we're going from one place to another. Where are we going from and where are we going to? We're going from here to there. Only not to there. We're going to there. Well, actually, where's east? We're going to there, to the kingdom. We're going east to the kingdom. We're going to heaven to meet God in the gates. But then after the birth pangs, we come to the kingdom. So I know it's complicated with several pictures laid one on top of the other. I'm trying to make it very simple. But when that awakening blast sounds, it is not enough to say, "Oh, I'm going to glory land." That's not enough. You're going from one place to another, but where are you going to? And when are you going? Which is the one that nobody cares about. When are you going? We're going at Rosh Hashanah, which is basically Yom Kippur, in the kingdom, in the year 6001. All right, next slide. Okay. Then it says God sanctified. I'm not going to go through all these because I'm assuming you know them. It says that you shall sanctify the 50th year. What does that mean? You shall sanctify the 50th year. In Christian terminology, that's very common phrase. Sanctify. Sanctification. In Judaism, we don't know what that means because we never use the word. Because the word in Hebrew is kadosh, which just means separate.
Right.
We translate it holy, but it really means just separated from one thing to another. That's all it means. So when it says you shall sanctify, make holy the Shemitah year and the Jubilee year, how do you do that? How do you do that? Keep the Shabbat as a picture of the kingdom. How do you do that? Keep the Shemitah year as a picture of the kingdom. How do you do that? Keep the Jubilee year as a picture of the kingdom. You set it apart. You set it apart. So these are just verses that say, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, made it holy, because he rested. Exodus 31. You must keep my Sabbaths, because I'm the Lord who sets them apart, who sanctifies them. The seventh is always set apart. Exodus 20. Remember the Shabbat day to sanctify it, because I'm the Lord, because I made the Shabbat day and I blessed it, I sanctified it. Ezekiel 20. I gave them my Shabbats, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. Is of them the Shabbats or the people? Yes.
All right, Ezekiel 44. In the dispute,
These are the priests in the kingdom. In the kingdom. This is Ezekiel 40 through 48 is all about the kingdom. And in 44, talking about the priests in the kingdom, it says, in a dispute they shall judge according to my ordinances. They shall keep my Torot and my chukim, my translated as laws and ordinances, statutes, in all my appointed feasts, and sanctify my Shabbat. In the kingdom, they're to sanctify my Shabbat. So my question is this. We keep Shabbat now as a picture of the kingdom. Are we going to keep Shabbat then in the kingdom? With a resurrected body? Well, the festivals are also called Shabbatot, Sabbaths. Are we going to keep the festivals in the kingdom? Not only are we going to keep them, we're going to make, and I do mean make, because that's what it says. We're going to make Gentiles keep them. That's what it says over and over and over. You shall make the Gentiles to follow my Shabbat, my Torot, my laws, my statutes, my ordinances, and if they don't, there will be judgment on them. There'll be no rain on them. If they don't come up for Sukkot, just one example, I will judge them with no rain. So over and over again, not only are we going to keep the pictures in the real thing, we're then going to use those pictures to force, so to speak, force the Gentiles to do it too. Persuade. Thank you very much. I like that. To gently persuade the Gentiles to do that too. I like that. All right, next slide. Next slide. We're going to go to the next slide now. Come on back with the next slide. Breaker, we're going to need the next slide on that slideshow. Daniel, wake up. Next slide.
Blame the tower.
Yeah.
Look, I'm blaming the tower on this one. Where's my approach? I can't make my approach. Well, find some way to make it do something. Persuade it. I don't know what to do. Did you get it?
All right, thanks, bud. All right, thank you. Okay, so
The answer was what you said earlier. So if we're not allowed to reap or sow or prune or do anything like that in the kingdom, how are we going to eat? And yes, we're going to eat, even though we have a resurrected body. How are the righteous Gentiles who come to know God in the kingdom going to eat? I mean, the world has to keep going in the kingdom. It says you're going to build houses and plant vineyards and blah, blah, blah. But we're in the kingdom now. We're not going to do it. Who's going to do it? This is where the concept, you're going to love this. This is where the concept of the Shabbos Goy comes in. This used to make me so mad. Like I would talk to Jews and I'd say, well, did you guys go to work today? No. We had the Shabbos Goy do that stuff and then we just went to the synagogue. Why do you call them Shabbos Goy? It's so arrogant. It's so demeaning. Shabbos Goy, Sabbath Gentile. What, you think you're better than them? No, they're the Shabbos Goy. They wouldn't back off from it. I was like, well, explain to me, why you call them a Shabbos Goy? Because they're Goys and they work on Shabbat. We can't do it, so they do it for us. And I always thought that was so ugly. But you know what? It is absolutely the right picture. It is absolutely the right picture because in the kingdom, the whole world is going to be Shabbos Goys. It's the Shabbat. It's the day of the Lord. Well, who's going to do the work? Who's going to do the reaping and the sowing and the gathering and all that? The Gentiles. I'm going to show you. I'm going to prove it to you. I'm not just going to say it. I'm going to prove it. So that you can understand, like I came to understand, that they were right when they said Shabbos Goy. It's just that I was taking it wrong, like, God, how demeaning. It's not demeaning at all. It's the right picture. Let me show you. All right.
Let's go to Isaiah 61.
This is a really good chapter. Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the afflicted, to bring the gospel to the afflicted. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to captives. Now, what is he saying when he says to proclaim liberty to captives? Where does it say that in the Bible, in the Torah? It is the Jubilee. You shall proclaim liberty to the captives. That's what we just read in the Torah portion. That when the Jubilee comes, you shall blow the Yovel, right? And proclaim liberty to the captives. So that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about the kingdom proclaiming liberty to the captives and freedom to prisoners. To proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. What year? What year?
Jubilee year.
Right, the Jubilee year. It's the only year that has a title. It's the only year that has a title. Yovel. So proclaim the Yovel, the favorable year of the Lord, and the day of vengeance. Well, when is the day of vengeance?
Birth pangs.
In the day of the Lord, in the birth pangs. The birth pangs in the day of the Lord. So you know this, that the kingdom is both good and bad. It starts out bad, then the rest of it's really good, right? Well, after the bad, after the birth pangs, comes 993 years of the Jubilee. Look, think of it that way. To do what? To comfort all who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, giving them a garland instead of ashes, oil of gladness instead of mourning, mantle of praise instead of spirit of fainting. They will be called what? Oaks of righteousness? What? Human beings will be called oaks, trees of righteousness, planting of the Lord, those planted by the Lord, that they may be glorified. Now look at this. They will rebuild the ancient ruins. They will raise up the former devastations. They will repair the ruined cities. Well, when did the cities get ruined and everything got destroyed? When did that happen?
Birth pangs.
In the birth pangs. So after, I'll say it this way, after the cleanup work is done
Right.
from the birth pangs, the world is going to be Judaized. And Israel will fill the world with fruit. It even says the desolations of many generations. Then look at verse 5. Strangers. What is a stranger in the Bible? Who's a stranger?
William?
Yeah, Gentiles. Strangers, Gentiles, will stand and pasture your flocks. Stand and pasture whose flocks? Israel's. Strangers will stand and pasture your flocks. And foreigners, what's a foreigner? Gentiles, will be your farmers and your vine dressers. You don't have to do it. They're going to do it. The Gentiles are going to take care of the Jews. I've met a few Christians, a few Gentiles who've been so kind to Jews. I mean, they just love Israel. They love Jews. And they bend over backwards to do for Jews. I've only met a few, though. I've only met a few. And I've been a believer 42 years this year. But I've met a few. And they're, I'm talking about ones who aren't in Messianic Judaism. They'll do anything for Israel. This is going to fill the whole world. These kind of people are going to fill the world. Why? Because they have to. They're going to be gently persuaded to by God. You know those verses in Matthew 25 where it says that Yeshua will sit on his throne and he'll separate the sheep from the goats? Sorry. Yeah, that's right. The sheep on the right and the goats on the left, right? Yeah. And he says, Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. You never took care of my people. My people. That's the judgment. That's the measuring stick for the judgment in the kingdom. Who took care of Israel? Who cared about the Jews? That's all God cares about. And he cares about that because that's the only structure that God built so that we can get to know him in the first place. And if you don't love that, it's really, really difficult to come to know God the way he wants us to come to know him. It's not impossible. It's just really hard. And so you got to love that structure. You got to love that body of Israel, that body of Judaism that tells us how to come to know him and gives us all the pictures of how to come to know him. And the whole world's going to end up like that. Isaiah 61, verse 4, 6. Okay, we read that. So, next slide. I'm going to show you some more about Gentiles who are going to do this. In 1 Chronicles. Is that what it says? I'm guessing. Is that what it says? 1 Chronicles? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, good. So in 1 Chronicles, the last few chapters, I keep reading in Spanish. The last few chapters, chapters 23 through 27, give us every detail that you'd ever want to know about how David set up the kingdom. Why do we need to know this? Because if you're going to know the kingdom, like what's going to happen, when things are going to happen, what it's going to be like, what you're going to be doing, making it personal to you, if you're going to know that stuff, you have to look at the patterns that God gave us so we can know what it's like. Well, David specifically says that this whole breakdown in chapters 23 through 27, he says, God showed this to him in a vision that he wrote down by the Spirit. This is a nationwide thing. That every detail of it, and every detail of the temple, and every detail of the priesthood, he only wrote it because he saw it in a picture in heaven. So, if you're going to know the kingdom, you have to know these passages, because this is what it's going to be like. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Nobody got that?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, one person got it. Were you able to follow that? Okay, 2 people got it. All right, I'll go with that. I'll take that. Okay, so in chapter 23, he sets up the offices of the Levites. It's going to be Levites in the kingdom. In chapter 24, he sets up the courses. This means the divisions. This means 2 per month. The courses of the Levites. There's going to be Levites in the kingdom. In chapter 25, he sets up the courses of the musicians. They came up twice a month, 2 different courses per month. And what's really cool, I just saw this in Nehemiah, that there were whole cities that were just for the musicians. The musicians went and built their own cities near Jerusalem. So there's going to be courses of musicians. There are going to be musicians in the temple, in the kingdom. Courses of gatekeepers and the treasurers and the apostles that were sent out from Jerusalem to go teach the Gentiles. That's going to be in the kingdom. And then chapter 27, the courses of the army, 2 per month, and the officers of the tribes. There's going to be officers of the tribes in the kingdom. I wonder who they're going to be. And then it goes into all these little jobs. And I don't know if you've ever read these, but there's a couple of Gentiles in there. And they take care of the Gentile stuff. Whoa, what happened? What chapter are we in? 20 what?
27.
27, okay. Let me know when it comes back on, if it does. Battery's dead. Okay. Chapter 27. All right, look at these jobs. Verse 25. Verse 25. Azmavet, son of Adiel, had charge of the king's storehouses. Those are, silos, big silos and house barns. All the king's storehouses. Now, you can take this spiritually if you want. Think about there's other things in the storehouses like strength, love, kindness, mercy, humility, other things like that. That's fine. But this is physical. And Yochanan, the son of Uzziah, these are Jews, had charge of the storehouses in the country, in the cities, in the villages, and in the towers. Ezri ben Chelub, this is a Jew, had charge of the agricultural workers who tilled the soil. He didn't till the soil. Who tilled the soil? We saw it in Isaiah 61. Who tilled the soil? Who tilled the soil? The Gentiles, the foreigners, the strangers. But a Jew was in charge of them, Ezra, son of Chelub. Verse 27, Shimei of Ramat, he's a Jew, had charge of the vineyards. Zabdi of Shipmi had charge of the produce of the vineyards and the wine cellars, a Jew also. Baal Hanan, the Gederite, had charge of the olive and sycamore trees. He's a Jew. In the Shephelah. And Joash had charge of the stores of oil. He's a Jew. Shitri of Sharon had charge of the cattle who were in the Sharon. Sharon is the valley. And he's a Jew. Shaphat, son of Adlai, had charge of the cattle in the valleys. He's a Jew. Ovil the Ishmaelite. This is in David's kingdom, guys. Ovil the Ishmaelite. That is no Jew. He's a son of Ishmael. He's an Arab. Ovil the Ishmaelite had charge of the camels. I think that's pretty cool. And Yedaiah, he's a Jew of Meron, had charge of the donkeys. Yaziz the Hagarite. You know who Hagar was? The Egyptian wife of Abraham. And had many, many, many children who were Arabs. Ishmaelites.
Right.
So this guy, Gentile, had charge of the flocks. All these were overseers of the property which belonged to King David. All right, it goes on. So there's Gentiles mixed in with the Jews who had jobs. But we know that those who are going to reap, those who are going to prune, those who are going to sow, those who are going to take care of the agriculture are who? Gentiles. The Shabbos Goy. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. In the kingdom, it's not going to be like in the church system. It's not going to be set up like Europe. It's going to be set up like Israel. And the authority and the power and the strength and the truth of everything in the universe is going to come from Jerusalem out to Israel and then out to the Gentiles. So what are you going to do? What's your job? What are you going to be doing in the kingdom? Teaching in a church? Setting up a Kiddush table? I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to be doing? Like leading worship? I mean, you need to figure this out. And it's going to take you a while to do it. The only way you're going to do it is to pray, ask God, to help you figure it out, and to look at the scriptures that talk about what it's going to be like in the kingdom. And something will, it'll flash in you. You go, ooh, that feels good. That's how I did it. I would read these passages about the different jobs, and I go, God, show me what I'm going to be doing. And a couple of them went, bam, inside of me. And it was like, oh, okay, I'll follow up on those. And I just got more and more and more clarity about what I'm going to be doing in the kingdom. I'm going to have a resurrected body, but I'm not just going to sit around and worship for 1,000 years. And neither are you. So I would encourage you to figure out how you can live the Jubilee and the Shemitah year. You got to come to know it. And you're not going to be doing the work. The work's going to be done for you. So I would really encourage you to go on a search on your own and start making the kingdom, like appropriating it and make it part of you. So that you get up in the morning and you're thinking kingdom. You go to bed at night, you're thinking kingdom. You're assailed by all this garbage during the day, and you kind of, like a magnet, you kind of, naturally just snap back onto kingdom stuff. But that's only going to happen if you make habits. And the first habits are doing the prayers. You got to get into the habit of learning the prayers. It's taken me 8 months, a full 8 months to learn the morning prayers. But I got them. 8 months it took. So, it's going to take you some time, but start, living more kingdomish. All right? Do the prayer, learn the prayers, do the counting of the Omer. It's not just the festivals. There's so much more than that. It's not just the festivals, guys. It's daily. So, that's all I got. Let's pray. And I'm going to ask God that you would set this, like your ring, your signet ring, into the wax of not our heart, but our soul, our nefesh. Our spirit, it's already there in our spirit, because our spirit is alive. But I ask that you'd put this into our souls, Lord, that you'd embed it into our soul. In the name of Yeshua, that your Ruach would just come alive in us, to give us hope and to give us strength, so that we can be girded with strength as Israel, and clothed in strength as Israel, and crowned with glory as Israel. And I thank you, Father, for spreading out the earth above the waters, and for directing our steps, the steps of man. Thank you for taking care of our every need. And I thank you, Father, for your Ruach and your Torah. In the name of Yeshua. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.